and welcome to Future You, the podcast brought to you by graduate careers experts Prospects. I'm your host, Emily Slade, and in this episode I talk to Liam Taylor, a freelance content marketer. He talks about his journey into becoming a full-time freelancer, the pitfalls and problems he encountered along the way, things that worked out well, and advice for anyone thinking of doing it themselves.
So I'm Liam Taylor. I am a freelance content marketing professional. I also have a background in education, arts education and music production, music composition. And I'm here today to talk about freelancing, why it's a good idea, why it's maybe the best idea.
Not that you're biased or anything.
I'm so biased. That will come across.
Incredible. So let's start with your journey so far to becoming a freelancer. Did you go to university? What's going on there?
So no university. I did do further education. So I did secondary school, not high school, secondary school because Cambridge. Secondary school, I did 2 years at sixth form and I studied very employable subjects like philosophy and classics. Mm-hmm. I got kind of sick in my first year, glandular fever, which takes ages to get over. So I sort of didn't do particularly well in my exams. So I think university would have been an option, but I was sort of off the idea of education. The only reason I went back and completed my A-levels was because my parents convinced me, well, it's free. If you wait any amount of time, you're going to have to pay even to complete these courses. So probably finish it. And if you mess it up, it's not the end of the world. You tried, whatever. So I got, I think, a couple A-levels and then just went straight into work. So I had like retail jobs for a few years. And what was cool about that was it kind of gave me the headspace to realize, oh, what am I actually into? What do I think I'm good at? What would I like to get better at? And I realized actually music is something I'm rather fond of. But I don't just want to be one of those people that has a music career out of nothing because I sort of don't believe that's real. I'm going to go study music. And I found this lovely course in Norwich, actually, a place called, well, it's now called Access Creative. It was called Access to Music at the time. And what was good about Access to Music was it didn't just teach you how to play your instrument. There were music history lessons, music business lessons, music promotion, and you basically get placed into a band. And then that is your band for 2 years, more or less. And you record music with that band, you do gigs with that band, you get like graded on stagecraft as well as like how well does he play guitar? He plays guitar very well, but he doesn't move. So, so that was quite interesting. And what was particularly interesting to me about that course was I thought I was an excellent guitar player. Now, I was fine. I was absolutely fine. But I could not compete. There were some ridiculous players there, and some of them were like 5 years younger than me. And one of them I was in a band with. And
some of them were Ed Sheeran.
Ed Sheeran was in the year above me, I think. I'm told we met, but I don't remember. I'm not going to claim to know you, Ed. It's fine. Don't worry. So I had to kind of find other ways to compete. So in a musical way, the way I competed was getting sort of good with music theory and composition. So I couldn't like shred, but maybe my note choice was a little more interesting. And I was also getting into kind of the business side of music and kind of how one might use social media to, market your band. How can you stand out? There's like guerrilla tactics of, well, you can turn up and play anywhere if you're brave enough. So, how would you go about doing that sort of thing?
Was this at a time when social media, what sort of era of social media are we at here?
Gosh.
I don't want to like name and shame you with dates.
No, that's fine. I'm trying to think. I imagine this would have been it was the early 2010s.
Okay. So social media sort of
maybe.
Instagram's around.
YouTube was definitely around. We didn't really know it was, going to turn into it was. There was definitely Twitter. There was definitely YouTube. I think Instagram was maybe emerging at that time. So there were a lot of conversations about, well, how can we use YouTube? SoundCloud was the big one at the time. I think that had been around a little bit. So having left Access to Music, I was teaching guitar privately in my parents' living room. And what I ended up doing was, I don't know if you've ever tried to teach someone guitar, but between lessons, they sort of don't care. They say they want to learn, but they just want to be good immediately, which is not how skills work.
Wow.
Yeah. So what I did was I ended up recording... I kind of got like a rough syllabus together. So there was a handful of students that I would all be teaching basically the same thing. So I could record a video of, okay, this is how this scale works. This is the exercise I've given you. I want you to try it at this tempo, then this tempo. If it sounds like this, you're doing really well. You might fall over at this point, in which case try this. So then that was kind of a way to sort of keep people engaged. So I started what would become the LT Guitarist YouTube channel at that point. And that was, I guess, the first social media thing I was actively doing. But I wasn't doing it to be like, oh, yeah, give me subscribers. No. It was more about I'm trying to like do like a value add for these students, I guess. And then actually what happened over time was that YouTube channel kind of grew. So I started doing stuff that was for YouTube rather than for students. I think around about the same time I was running live music nights, which I was bad at, and sort of learned a lot of lessons about how to use Twitter, how to use Facebook, how to use Facebook events, Facebook advertising, these kinds of things. So that was kind of the period where I made loads of mistakes. And I'm a big advocate of mistakes, so I don't regret those mistakes. But it's it was an opportunity to learn, and I think if I were to think back, if I knew at the time, oh, I'm making mistakes, it's fine, I'm going to grow and develop. At the time, it's just frustrating. Why is no one at this gig? This is a really good band. And then about that same time, I got hired to make a podcast. And I use that word loosely because we didn't really have podcasts then. We sort of, I think, really sort of high-tech nerdy dudes might have known what a podcast was. I got hired to make this kind of show for a arts and music magazine, sort of off the back of being involved in local gigs. And we uploaded it to Mixcloud, which is like SoundCloud, except you haven't heard of it. And these days, I think Mixcloud is more specifically for kind of DJs to like upload their sets. I don't know why we did it. I think there were like restrictions on what you could upload to SoundCloud at the time. So we just went with whatever platform we could put it on. And then over time, that project ran out of money, which happens to a lot of arts projects. And we sort of decided, actually, it might be kind of nice to keep this sort of thing going. So we came up with a music blog. So our sort of background with running events kind of turned into this music blog. And there was a little podcast for that where we would interview like local bands and touring bands and stuff. So really straightforward sort of interview format, not dissimilar to what we're doing now for interview format podcast, again, hosted on Mixcloud for some reason. And that was kind of the first constant kind of routine social media content that I was making kind of at the same time as doing the LT Guitarist music stuff. That podcast would eventually turn into The Conversation Hat, which is still going now. And where are we? Oh, I can't really put it, but that probably takes us up to about 2014, I guess. 2014, I got a part-time job as a music and performing arts technician, which is a little bit like a specialist TA, I guess. If you went to high school, you may have seen like science technicians, like the people that live in a cupboard and only come out to arrange beakers. It was that kind of thing, but for keyboards and guitar amplifiers and stuff. So I spent a bit of my time fixing stuff, fixing the same 3 guitars that would have the same problem every term because kids don't know how to work guitars, which is fine. That's why they hired me. Sometimes teaching kids one-on-one, which is fine because I'd taught guitar previously. And the difference here is that they're already in school, so they can't run away from my lesson or just not turn up. And a little bit of kind of music ICT, so trying to get this computer suite together. And we were using like a 10-year-old version of Pro Tools on computers that was not built for either of those things. So trying to really get blood from the stone that is a 10-year-old version of Pro Tools, and 14-year-olds that don't really want to be there. So that was a really fun job. There were lots of cool opportunities, even though it was a part-time thing. Like I got to take kids to perform at Royal Albert Hall.
Oh, wow.
Like really cool stuff like this. And because it was part-time, it meant that I could do silly online stuff like Conversation Hat podcast, trying to make comedy sketches, release music, keep doing the LT Guitarist YouTube stuff. And that was, I kind of leveraged the fact that I've been doing these music interviews for so long to get interviews with like some of my favourite artists. So I managed to talk to Dan Lassac, of Dan Lassac's Scroobius Pip, and got an interview with him, which became like, I think the only episode of that particular podcast. There's just one single episode up and it's me talking to Dan Lassac, which is a lot of fun. So kind of, leveraging my background in that kind of journalism to get some cool people on board. What does that take us to? That takes us to lockdowns.
Oh.
Lockdown was really interesting because I sort of realised I'd been in that job for too long. It was close to 8 years. There were some cool opportunities, but I don't know if you've looked at, education industry is kind of tricky, especially at secondary level, because there's just no money. So it was kind of a case of, well, do I stay here in case the whole industry gets better, which it probably won't, or do I just pack it in and do something else? Like, well, what would I do if I were to pack it all in? And I think it was 2021 that I sort of decided, it was kind of the summer of 2021. I was like, no, I'm going to quit. This isn't fun anymore. The money isn't worth it. There's no opportunities. It's only going to get worse. So I came up with a plan. I was smart. I had a plan and then I quit, which was the right way to do that. And I realized actually all of these skills that I've developed, so that the social media stuff, the YouTube, the podcasting, because I was quite good at the YouTube stuff, it meant I knew how to use the DSLR. So in theory, I could take photos as well. I'd spent 8 years trying to get teenagers to care about things they don't care about. So I was quite good at like encouraging language, but also talking in quite a simple fashion. So these kind of communication skills and the kind of creative media stuff, I sort of eventually realized, oh, that's a little bit like advertising. That's a bit like marketing. And because everyone's trying to do business online at the moment, so actually a digital marketing career might be a smart thing to do. So I packed that job in October 2022. I think mid-October 2022 was my last working day. And I basically spent 2 or 3 months learning as much as I could, because I've been doing stuff online for ages, but I didn't know like the technical language. I didn't know like all of these acronyms. I didn't know what they were. So I kind of spent a few months formalizing this stuff that I knew so I could describe it in a way that someone else in marketing knew what I was doing. And then I managed to get my first 2 clients, I think January, February of 2022. And that is pretty much what I've been doing since then. When I started out, whilst trying to get those couple clients, I had some audio tech work. So there was a backlog of Cambridge University graduations because lockdown. If you go to Cambridge, you want the fancy Latin graduation, right? That's the whole point, surely. Yeah. So there weren't really restrictions on people attending these ceremonies, but there were restrictions on travel to get into the country. Right. So I got hired to do this backlog of tech for Cambridge University graduation. So I was literally just sitting by an audio desk waiting for one person to speak Latin, and then when they're done, turn their fader down, next fader up for the next person to speak Latin. It's very important that people on the other side of the world heard this Latin, apparently. So that was a little bit of work that I had off the back of doing sort of audio tech for secondary schools for 8 years. And I also did some work on Fiverr. Oh, yeah. Writing batches of jokes for social media. So kind of copywriting, but the idea was that a company would say, my industry is this. We don't have content for social media. So if you could write us 20 jokes around this subject, that would be great. I stopped doing that because people from non-English speaking countries didn't get the jokes I was writing.
Right,
I was like,
yeah.
I'm not going to sit here and explain why I'm funny to you. That doesn't feel fun. So I just sort of stopped doing Fiverr because of that.
Just briefly explain what Fiverr is.
So Fiverr is a website where it started out, you can pay someone to do very nearly anything for you for £5. So, for example, if you are setting up a record shop and you need a logo, you can, in theory, hire someone to make you a logo for £5. And in reality, that costs a lot more than £5. So in recent years, it's become a system of, well, if you want this kind of, if you want me to spend this long making a logo, it'll look a bit like this and it'll cost you £100 or whatever. It's that same sort of thing. So I had tiers. I had a £5 tier, which was I will write you a single joke and it might not be good, even in English. And I will do that for a £5. So if you're not sure what kind of service you're going to get out of me, it'll only cost you a £5 and I only received like £3 of that. So it's really low risk just to try it out. That's basically what Fiverr is. It's really good for some things. And they're going quite heavily on their advertising at the moment as well. Like, it's quite hard to avoid Fiverr adverts. Yeah.
When you were teaching guitar in your parents' living room, had you set yourself up as a sort of self-employed teacher? Was that the first entry into self-employment for you?
So, in a legal sense, no. Because I wasn't earning enough money for it to be HMRC's problem, basically. So it was kind of me doing word of mouth, posting adverts on musicteacher.co.uk. I did make flyers as well, but I would be shocked if any of them helped because I didn't know how flyers worked back then.
And then you talked about various sort of side hustles along the way. Were they making you any money? Does Conversation Hat bring in any money? Does sort of any of these little projects you were doing, were they financially successful or just skill expanding?
It was pretty much just skill expanding. I wasn't really seeking to earn money through them. Over the years, Conversation Hat sort of grew to a point where we have like a nice little family of Patreon supporters at the moment. So a few years ago, it became necessary to create Odd Creative Limited. So once we had that company, we could also do like bespoke media. And that was actually, I suppose I sort of forget that I did that as well. That's not on my notes, weird. Odd Creative was a company I founded whilst working in schools so that I could do these kind of like advertising, filmmaking things. We never really had many gigs. The main reason Odd Creative was founded as a limited liability company was so that the Patreon money we get from Conversation Hat could go somewhere. And then we would pretty much, everything we made from Patreon would go back into the podcast in some way, whether that's new microphones, whether that's recording space, website hosting, stickers, all of these things you need to have a podcast. And that was kind of the point of the Conversation Hat. It was never a money-making venture. I'm one of the few people that started a podcast not trying to make money from it, if TikTok is to be believed. So there was never the goal. So everything kind of just went back into the podcast and that kind of, learning how to, am I going to make a bunch of flyers for the Conversation Hat? Well, how do you make flyers? How do you get people's attention in a helpful way? It was, they made money, but it was more about learning. I'm also one of these people, if I'm not being creative in some way, I get physically uncomfortable. So it was kind of a way to scratch that itch as well without hurting myself. I don't know what I mean by that. I'm sorry.
I know what you mean. And when you did hit post-pandemic era where you moved more into sort of digital marketing, why did you choose to almost become a self-employed person with their own company than join a company as a digital marketer?
It was mostly about opportunity. I was looking for jobs, work in that field, but we're talking, I would been in my early 30s, I need to make a certain amount of money. And if you've not already got like a proven history in a field, you're only going to get internships. And digital marketing is one of those fields where like, they will exploit you. So it was very much I'm going to get these kind of micro credentials. And and kind of build up a kind of client base based on word of mouth as much as possible. And then hopefully if I get to a point where I do need to get like a contracted job, I will have had like a proven history in it, and I'll just go about it my own way. My life is a long list of me trying to do things the wrong way and just brute force my way into whatever it is I want to do.
Fake it till you make it.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in that as well. And then just, when little opportunities come up, making sure I'm really making the most out of those. And a good example is one of the first music teachers I worked for ended up working at the Royal Opera House, and he lovely guy but complete technophobe. So anytime we were at school together, he would ask me to do video editing, audio editing. Can you please, I don't know which way in the HDMI goes, anything like that. So when he needed a video editor at Royal Opera House, I was kind of top of the list. So and that's been quite a regular little bit of work as well. And it's not like, I wouldn't say that's strictly speaking digital marketing. It's video editing, which is not digital marketing.
It's in the same pool.
Same sort of pool. It's same sort of skill set, just for a different application, I guess. So being able to have the Royal Opera House logo on my LinkedIn, on my website is quite helpful. So anytime those little opportunities come along, making sure that I'm really signposting them to people that come along. And quite often I will have, can you tell me about the work you did at the Royal Opera House? Like, it's kind of boring, but I will talk about it. Sure. I will absolutely tell you.
Amazing. So let's dive in now to what went wrong. What are your top 3 mistakes when you started becoming a freelancer?
Hang on, I wrote them down because there's so many. just only 3. Are you kidding? There's really silly things like I should have charged more money when I was starting out, but I didn't have the confidence to know what I was worth. I didn't have the confidence to look at what, if someone went to a company, what they would charge compared to, you're going to me. I can provide you a higher level of service because I'm physically standing in your shop with you. This company, you will never meet the people that are doing your marketing for you, but they're charging so much more. So that was something I never realized. One thing that, I don't know if this is really a mistake, it's just something I'm quite conscious of, is I don't have a great online presence myself as a digital marketer. Because when I'm in the mood to do digital marketing things, I'm basically doing those for clients. So I don't have the bandwidth to do that for myself. I've got a pretty solid brand as LT Guitarist, as this kind of musician and educator online. So I'm really happy with how I come across, like, musically in that way. But I'm quite conscious that I didn't put a lot of groundwork into me as a marketer, and my excuse is I'm too busy doing that for other people to do it for myself.
Do you think it's a necessity? If somebody wanted to develop a freelance career as a digital marketer, would you recommend that they build an online presence before going out into the world, or did it not really matter as long as you can find clients? But is it a case of you're not going to get the clients unless you have the online presence? So
what worked for me is being able to prove, well, look, this is the marketing that I've been doing for my music projects. This is the marketing that I've been doing for the Conversation Hat podcast, things like that.
So you almost did have a presence. It just wasn't specifically...
Yeah. So I could point at, this is what I did for this is why it works. So I've built my own, what's it called?
Almost portfolio.
Yeah, kind of case studies, that's it. So if you don't have the opportunity to do that for a project you've made for yourself, or for like your auntie's bakery or something, for example, it's probably worth like investing in your own personal brand as a marketer. So I think, for some people, I think that's going to be a necessity, definitely. Another big mistake was not realizing that what clients say they want and what they actually want are rarely the same thing.
Oh, wow.
I have so many conversations about, let me explain why you don't want a viral video. It's not going to help in any way. You might get some views, but it's not actually going to do anything. So pretty much all of the time, what clients want is for their business to make more money.
Of course.
And, as British people, we're sort of told, don't talk about money. It's weird. But actually, no, companies want to make more money. And I think it's okay to say that. So when a client says to me, we'd really like to increase our reach on TikTok, I'm like, okay, why though? So the way that I have those conversations is to sort of engage with it initially at face value. Like, okay, you want a viral video, so what kind of things would happen in this viral video? How would you want to go about this? What would be like your target? And what would the outcome be? And then when they tell you the outcome, you say, there's a much more cost-effective way to get that outcome. It's this. It might go viral. It won't, but it might. So yeah, trying to interpret what they say they want, because these are the words that they've heard on TV.
Yeah, of course.
Versus, well, the outcome I want is, even if it's, for example, I'd love it if we could grow the company to a point where we have more opportunities for our staff. We have like a nice Nescafe coffee maker rather than a rusty old kettle. It's like, okay, what you're saying is you want more money. Basically, you want more money. That's fine. Let's try and get you more money. And they'll have an idea of, well, we want to do that through social video or increasing brand awareness. And then, yeah, so quite often I'll entertain it at face value for a little bit. And then when we don't get the results they're expecting, say, okay, well, I have this alternative that might yield results. We tried your thing. Didn't work, let's try this other thing.
And are these things that you've just picked up along the way because of your own trial and errors throughout the last sort of 20 years of your working life?
Pretty much. So I had some YouTube videos that did rather well quite early on, and almost no knock-on effects to any of my videos. So I've got a fair few subscribers, but not many views, for example, on certain YouTube channels, just because people come along for this one particular video, but then there's no follow-on. I only do one of those kinds of videos, so people aren't going to stick around for more, things like that. So trying to explain to clients, we can absolutely do that. But yeah, you're right. It is pretty much just my own trial and error, having been playing around at the internet, poking things, tagging on things, see what happens when you do certain things online. Yeah, this is why I'm a big advocate of mistakes. And having like my own, the LT Guitarist brand and the Conversation Hat brand means I can go make those mistakes. I don't have to make those mistakes on my client's time.
Yes.
I've already done it. It's fine.
Yeah. No, it's brilliant. So the other end of that spectrum, what are your top 3 wins since becoming a freelancer?
It's a little bit corny, but leaving the security of contracted work in the first place was big. Because I'd been at this school for 8 years. I was really friendly with a lot of the staff and really liked the kids. So it was a really tough decision. Even though it was part-time work, it took up like a lot of kind of emotional energy, a lot of my time. So kind of knowing, right, I'm not making a lot of money, but I know exactly how much money I get at the end of every month. Leaving that security for
who knows what,
more money, less money, no money, like really no way to know. So that was quite big. And the next big win after that was, I think it took me a total of 4 months to be making as much money freelancing as I was with that job, which is pretty
quick turnaround.
It's
considering.
Pretty quick. Also highlights just how little money I was making. That's the main story there. But I think that's quite nice. Like within a sort of, what's that, a third of a year? Can't do maths. Within a bit of a year, kind of to be back where I was, but doing it entirely by myself, entirely work that I'd created for myself. I was really proud of that.
And why? What was the choice behind not? Because part-time work, in theory, you could have become a freelance digital marketing manager in your days off. Why did you make the choice to leave the structure and safety net and dive in without one? Yes.
So I was doing that a little bit. That's kind of how the YouTube channel and the Conversation Hat podcast, they sort of happened in the background during this job. Without getting into the gritty detail, the school had been taken over by a multi-academy trust. Became a really bad place to be.
Right.
Is the short version of that story.
So it was a case of, not only do I have another option, but this option isn't as nice anymore.
So even though it was only 20-something hours a week, I found that I spent all of my free time dreading having to go to work the next day. Right. That's the short version of it.
If that hadn't happened, do you think you would have tried to juggle the two and have it as a safety net?
My long-term plan there, initially I only intended to stay there for 5 years. I wanted to see an entire cohort of kids start in year 7 and leave with music. I know. And leave in year 11 with pretty good music GCSEs. That was my goal going in. Yes, exactly. So then having achieved that 5 years in what literally felt like a blink, it just sort of disappeared, and then sort of staying there for another 3 years, my goal was to try to gradually reduce my hours there and gradually increase freelance hours. At the time, the goal was to do that with music composition work, maybe a little bit of videography, so sort of the stuff that I made Odd Creative for, so maybe some more podcasting stuff, some more sort of bespoke media. But I was thinking more, I wasn't thinking so much about being a digital marketer, more of like, I suppose I was. I just didn't really put that label on it.
Yeah.
So I'd had a few jobs making like YouTube adverts for companies, but it was just the standalone advert. There was no strategy behind it, which I suppose is what makes you a digital marketer, is having like the overall plan and like a document you can refer back to. We're going to make this kind of TikTok because the document says so. Just making standalone YouTube videos for companies, I did quite a bit. So I was hoping to kind of increase that, and hoping to increase kind of film scoring work as well that I was doing. And then, just gradually reduce the school hours and increase those freelance hours. But it just kind of got to a point. I mean, lockdown was a factor as well. One of the things that I was doing, because we couldn't be on site, so what I was doing quite often was the music teacher would say, hey, I'm teaching this thing to this group next year. Could you make me a video version of this? Or could you play piano, play guitar to demonstrate the thing I'm talking about? Yes, absolutely, I can do that. So then I got quite good at making not the highest quality video. It just had to be like really quick to turn over, really easy to edit, but still kind of engaging to watch, which is not dissimilar to how Instagram Reels works or how TikTok works now. So I got quite good at churning content out and having to do it in batches, sort of sit there, record for 3 hours and then spend the rest of a fortnight editing through that. That was kind of a helpful thing, that period of lockdown, to go, oh, I can actually really like go through content for this very specific thing. So there's no reason I couldn't also do that for a client, for example.
So did you make a mistake not going to university, do you think?
No. I would very much like to go to university at some point. What the problem would have been going straight from sixth form, where I was studying classics and philosophy.
Great combo.
Thank you. And then going from that into university, presumably still studying classics or philosophy. In my late teens, not knowing I was dyslexic.
Oh dear. Not the only one, I imagine.
Essay-based subjects for the dyslexic kid who doesn't know why he can't read as fast as the other kids. That's the main reason that would have been a problem. At the time, uni would have been a terrible idea for me. It's quite easy to sit here in retrospect and go, oh, I made a great decision 10 years ago. It was mostly twofold. Firstly, I don't really know what I want to do with my life. That's why I want to go into the world of work, see what's actually out there, because I've spent 7 years in education. I don't know what the world is actually like. I want to go encounter people, learn about the world, learn about myself, and then make an informed decision about what I want to do. The second kind of reason there was I was reticent to do 2 extra years of sixth form. I was reticent to go 5 years of school, 2 years of sixth form. I'm not then going to do another 3 years of learning. And I was only working in retail for a couple of years before I decided to go to Access to Music. I didn't expect that the result would be, oh, there are much better guitarists in the world. What if I got good at Twitter? So to answer your question, at the time, no, I was, again, very belligerently trying to do things my own way. Didn't really want to stay in education. And looking back on it, that was the right choice. And now I know I'm dyslexic. I know how to work around that, but I didn't know that at the time. So absolutely the right decision for me. at the time, I think. I would like to go back to university. There's some really interesting higher education courses, especially at the master's level. I think at some point I'm going to see if I can sneak my way in and do a master's course without doing the BA, because it's just for pure...
sort of time efficiency.
Yeah, exactly. Like I spent ages learning music and marketing through doing. I don't feel like I need to do the BA to understand then the content of this master's course. So maybe, you know, if I...
And would you focus on a master's around digital marketing to sort of expand your skill set there?
Maybe. I sort of at the moment feel like I'm doing okay with what I know. I think if I reach a point where I realise, oh, okay, actually I do have this gaping hole in my knowledge, I need to fix that in some way. And if it's not something I can fix with a Coursera course or a Skillshare course or something, if it needs to be bigger, then yeah, okay, masters is probably the way to go, and that's a good way to invest in myself. Something really esoteric in music might be really fun, or some sort of arts course I think would be really fun. Not sure. Loads of options. We'll see. We'll see when I have the money and the time, you know?
Yeah. So speaking of money, talk to me about tax returns. How, as a self-employed person, you obviously have money coming through the door, but no one to sort of deal with it, and you've got to pay your taxes, and you've got to not go to prison. How do you do that?
That's the two things I live by, really. Not going to prison, earning some money. Yes, so it is daunting at first. I sort of got to grips with tax returns through having the odd creative, which is just how, you know, that was early doors how I was making money whilst also having a job, and is today where the Conversation Hat Patreon funds go. So freelance, self-employed accounting is a lot easier than a company's accounting, because implicitly with a company you have an accountant or you have a specific person in your organization that does the books. So I kind of had to learn the hard way through doing that, and now I'm like, okay, actually doing it as self-assessment is a lot easier. The things to learn are just know that when HMRC send you a letter, you probably have to do something. They're not just sending you a letter for fun. They're quite efficient in that sense. Like, they're not going to waste paper on you unless you need to take action. Read the letter. That's a mistake that I made. I now use a website called FreshBooks. What's great about FreshBooks is there's a desktop version, there's a mobile version. So if, say, I'm going to an expo for a client, I can take a screenshot of my train ticket, upload that to FreshBooks, and FreshBooks knows this is a rail ticket. Which client do you want to assign this to? I'll assign this to this client. So then when it comes to invoice time, it goes, they this much for the hours that you work, they also owe you for this train journey and this lunch. So that's really handy, and it also will do reporting for you. So you can, for example, hook it up with your bank accounts. So it'll see everything you do, and then you can just like do a tick box. This is household stuff, this is household stuff, this is rent, and then this is an expense for this client, this is an expense for this client, and it will do a report for you, or like, you know, what various expenses as well that are maybe not specific to clients, but you need to do your job, like SD cards for my camera, for example. I'm going to need a lot of those, but it's not for any one client, so that's an expense. And then FreshBooks will do a report for you, and it very nearly resembles the information that HMRC wants from you. So you just sort of say, because there's two. There's the... No, hang on, I'm confusing myself. No. Because so this is the thing. There is a lot of stuff to do. I think if you're a company, you have to do an HMRC thing and another thing. I'm not an accountant.
But you haven't been to prison yet, so you're clearly doing something right.
I have had to pay one fine,
which
is I didn't read the letter when they sent it.
Right.
You always read the letter. Now I know. And that was because I thought that when you submit the accounts, the annual accounts for a company to HMRC, it automatically goes to the other thing that I can't remember.
Right.
It does not, unless you tick a box.
Okay.
You got to tick that box. So when they sent me a letter saying we haven't heard from you, we're like, haha, yeah, you have. Mm-mm. So it is very scary. But I suppose the good news is I clearly don't know what I'm doing, but I'm not in prison.
Yeah, and you've only
That's
made
the
that
good
mistake
news.
once.
I've made one mistake, had to pay one fine, and I haven't made that mistake.
Don't do
So
it
it's
again.
almost worth it to pay that fine.
Yeah, to learn.
Would highly recommend as a self-employed person. It is, I must stress, it's a lot easier as a self-employed person than trying to run a company and do company accounts. There's many fewer ways to mess it up as a self-employed person. So yeah, filing self-assessment tax returns is really scary at first, but actually if you have something like FreshBooks, and there are alternatives out there, of course, FreshBooks just happens to be the one that I like the look of the most, really does simplify it. So it is scary, but you're just going to have to do it because otherwise you go to prison, and no one likes prison. But definitely work out your threshold. So for the first, I think, year and a half that I was doing it, the freelance practice, I wasn't earning enough money to pay tax. So I voluntarily paid national insurance for that year because it's the right thing to do, and it was literally a couple quid. And then, so when you first start out, you're probably not going to make enough money for it to be anyone's problem. If you've got contracted work and you're doing freelance, it's definitely worth doing because the combination of those two wages might just tip you over that threshold. But learn what your threshold is and get in the habit of having an Excel sheet that adds up what you're doing if you don't want to pay for FreshBooks. Although FreshBooks is tax deductible, so that's good. Hot tip, everything is tax deductible, pretty much. And the handy thing for me is that I will quite often write music for the content that I'm making for clients. So I do need guitar strings in order to do this part of what I'm doing. So that's quite handy. So learn about what is and what is not tax deductible, learn what your threshold is, and just get used to keeping a sheet tally of what is coming in, what is going out. And you'll be fine. It is daunting, but you will be fine.
What didn't you think about when you started?
Firing clients.
Ooh, is that something that you've had to do?
Yes. Firing clients is such a weird thing, but it feels really good. It is a lot to do with what their expectations of you are.
Okay.
And what they say their expectations of you are.
Right.
So by and large, if you've just got to foster a scenario where you can just be really upfront about what you're expecting, what of their expectations you think you might not be able to fulfill. Are there alternatives you can offer? And it is basically, I've only ever had to say goodbye to clients because they weren't forthright about their expectations. And I also try to make it really clear that if I have a problem, I'm just going to tell you and we're going to find a way to work through it because I wouldn't have taken you on board if I didn't kind of want to do this work. So I want to find ways to make it work. So if I am blunt about a problem I'm having, it's because I want to do this and I want to make it work. It's just that your suggestion might be ridiculous. So being upfront about your expectations. I don't know if there is a way to work out if a client is disingenuous about their expectations, but I definitely didn't expect to have to tell people that we're not going to work together. This will be my last month. I've done this. And then providing, here's an SD card with all the stuff. Go away. It felt really weird the first couple of times. Now I kind of like it because it's
got the taste of power.
It is. Yeah, no, it really is. But it's also look, we tried it out. It could be that what you're trying to do just doesn't match up with the approach you want to take, and you're not willing to look past that. But maybe if I say, look, here are the problems, I'm out, that might help you realize, oh, actually, we need another approach. Most of the time, those clients are still doing what they were planning to, and they're not growing. Weird.
But that's good that you've clearly gotten to a point where there's not a panic to sort of cling on to every client that you've got.
Yes, that's true.
You do have the freedom and the space to make business decisions that not only help your company, but also help you as a person if it's frustrating working with these clients or if it's, not conducive to anyone, that sort of thing.
Exactly. And I think one of those was a decision where, like I said earlier, I get physically uncomfortable if I'm not making stuff, whether that's I need an outlet to make music. I need an outlet to be weird on the internet. That's the conversation hat. And most of my other creative itches are sort of scratched through client work. I got to a point where I'd kind of overbooked myself ever so slightly. And I was prepared for that because I was going to outsource some of the like the copywriting, some of like the really sort of officey type jobs to someone else. And the client in theory were fine with that, but they actually weren't. So I ended up having to do all of the work, not outsourcing any of it. And I didn't have any time to do any of the stuff that I need to do. So then it was just a case of, okay, which of my current clients are either not giving me that much money, are kind of annoying to work with, I could sort of balance out and get rid of the one that wasn't helpful or was kind of the
odd one out. Almost.
The odd one out, the one that just wasn't gelling is exactly the right word. And it wasn't necessarily that they'd done anything wrong. It was just at this moment, I need more time. Otherwise, I will explode. So sorry, bye.
That's fair.
And that was kind of a win as well, to be like, okay, I am actually kind of in demand now. So it's quite a good position to be in. And it isn't just that. Here's a tip. If you are going to fire a client, don't just leave. Give them options. And this is something I learned being in bands back in the day and learning about band management. If you're in a band, if you can't make a gig or you need to quit, you need to give them like a little list of people to rely on. This guy's a great player, but he smells. This guy is not a very good player, but he's nice to be around. This guy has a lot of disposable income. Pros and cons of each of these people, and you can go away and make a decision. And by and large, they probably won't use your suggestions, but you have to give that so you're not just abandoning them, disappearing them, leaving them high and dry. Give them an opportunity to do what it is they want to do, but just not being a part of that. So always try to give them someone, or if it is their approach is wrong, say, I wholeheartedly believe that you're making a mistake in your approach. Here's what I would suggest. And usually that's just me reprinting out the strategy document I do in like my first week with them. Just like, if you read the thing I made, that is my suggestion. I'm just going to highlight bits of it passive aggressively, underline things. That's what you should be doing. Bye.
Excellent. So you obviously didn't go to university. We've already talked about that. You might go in the future. But in the meantime, you have done quite a few short courses. Would you like to talk about those?
Absolutely. So yeah, when I was starting out, October of 2021, can't remember what I said. Really eager to sort of formalize what I'd been doing all this time online, learn those acronyms, all sorts of things. Coursera was a really good website. It's a bit like Skillshare. It's the word course with ra on the end. You can audit quite a lot of their courses and only pay if you want the certificate, which is really handy. Wow. You can also make your own certificates quite easily, just saying. So I found that was really good, not just to learn stuff, but also to learn that there's lots of different approaches. Sometimes if you go to university, you feel like you're learning the way that things are rather than one specific approach. So what those courses and being able to audit them meant that I could sort of see, well, here's lots of different approaches. Do I want to do one of these? Do I want to pick and choose? Am I going to find a problem if I take half of this course, half of this course? And then I ended up paying for a certificate in the one that I sort of aligned with the most. Google have some quite good digital marketing courses because Google want you to use Google and Google want you to be good at making your websites so that they work on Google. So Google will tell you what to do. This is also true of Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, all of them. They will tell you how they work. They will offer you quite a lot of free certificates if you learn how to use their platform properly. So if you are really into Instagram, for example, they have resources that you can learn how to be really good at Instagram. I also did a graphic design course in Cambridge, sixth form, Hills Road. It was like an 8-week course, and I sort of did it because I found that making social media posts, I was just kind of putting stuff on Canva and not really think like the headline's there and there's a person's face. What do you want? So that was kind of good to learn a bit about the theory of graphic design, and kind of get to grips with Adobe Illustrator and Photoshop programs like that I still use. So yeah, that graphic design course was great, and I ended up designing a bunch of merch for the Conversation hat as well. And yeah, just learning the basic. It's a bit like music. If you learn what the basic rules are, then you know how many rules you can get away with breaking. And you think, well, I can break it in this way and it has this effect. As long as I don't do this other thing, we'll be fine. So graphic design, I'm not a graphic designer, but I definitely use images and video to try and communicate ideas. So that was a great way to sort of formalize that as well. Yeah, big fan of short courses.
Yeah, perfect. That's fantastic. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me. Really appreciate it.
Thanks again to Liam for his time. If you want to find out more about what he does or listen to his podcast, you can click the links in the description. Make sure you give us a follow wherever you get your podcasts, and if you're enjoying Future You, make sure to leave us a review. To learn more about freelancing, you can head to prospects.ac.uk. If you want to get in touch, you can email at podcast@prospects.ac.uk or find us on Instagram and TikTok. All the links are in the description. Thanks very much for listening, and we'll see you next time.